Chapter 26. The Reveal. "I'm coming with you," Annabeth held. "You're still recovering," Percy pointed out, gesturing to her bandage-wrapped leg. She crossed her arms. "Chiron says I'm fine. I need the exercise. Besides, if it's anything like last time, we'll have nothing to worry about." Percy sighed. She could be so stubborn sometimes. They walked out of the big house and made their way into the woods towards the ritual site. Aliana's head pounded as her eyes fluttered open and the world rushed back into focus. She felt a hard pull digging into her back. She tried to move her hands, but she couldn't. Looking over her shoulder, she was just able to see the rope binding her to the bed. Her weapons were piled in the corner of the room, mocking her as they sat just out of reach. She jerked against her bonds but couldn't get free. She'd give him this. Mason could tie a good knot. The bed wouldn't budge, as if it were nailed to the floor. She gave one last tug before sighing in defeat. No way would she get out that way. She looked down and noticed the edge of a knife's hilt sticking out of her boot. She chuckled. "Looks like you missed one, Mason." She twisted her body, laying on her side against the floor and reaching for her boot. She contorted her back, spine arching around the bedpost. Her fingers brushed the sliver of the handle. She stretched her reach as far as it would go. She barely brushed the knife, slowly pushing it up out of her boot. Finally, it tipped and fell into her palm. A grin spread across her face as she twirled it in her hand and shimmied her hands, rubbing the rope against the blade. Percy and Annabeth stood before the ritual site. There was no sign of life, but that didn't mean no one was there. As if to confirm their suspicions, a twig snapped in the woods. They both whirled to face the noise. Percy gripped Riptide, ready to uncap it at a moment's notice. Annabeth gripped her knife. "So jumpy." A voice sounded behind them. They flinched and turned to face the speaker. A boy with shaggy black hair and stormy eyes stepped out of the tree line. He had freckles scattered across his face. He strutted down the gradual incline towards the stone circle. His right hand clutched a softly glowing object. As Annabeth focused on it, she realized it was a fist-sized clear stone that looked like it had a lightning storm inside it. She gasped. "Zeus's stone." The boy held up a magical object. "Quite an incredible thing, isn't it? So much power in such a small package. Capable of taking what matters most to a half-blood, stripping them of their identity." He tightened his grip on it, making it flash brighter. He smiled as he admired the artifact. "You're the abandoned son," Annabeth realized. The boy looked up and shrugged. "I guess I am." He flashed his dimples in a crooked smirk. Percy's eyes widened. "You're Mason, the boy Aliana met in Denver." "So, she told you about me." He turned to his gaze on Percy. "How flattering." "What did you do to her?" Annabeth took a step towards him. "Where is she?" Percy stopped her before she could charge Mason. "I'm right here." Aliana emerged from the trees, bow in her hand, arrow nocked. She drew back the string and focused her angered gaze on Mason. He met her gaze, almost looking sad. She aimed her bow at his chest. "I can't let you do this, Mason. I may not have my powers, but I can still aim." She let all of her anger, bitterness, and betrayal saturate her voice. "Allie," he tried, raising his hands defensively. "Don't!" Aliana's hands shook. "You have no right to even speak." He dropped his hands. "I never wanted you to get involved." He pulled a handgun from beneath his jacket and fired at her. Aliana dove out of the way. The bullet embedded itself into a tree trunk. Mason turned and held out the stone. He stepped into the stone circle and it sparked to life. A bolt of lightning shot from the stone towards Annabeth. "Annabeth!" Percy lunged forward, shoving her out of the way. He cried out as they landed on the ground. "Percy!" Annabeth knelt beside him, examining the singed portion of his shirt. "It's okay," he assured. "It just grazed me." Aliana dove out of the brush and tackled Mason to the ground, knocking the gun from his hand. She grabbed his wrists and pinned his arms down. He glared at her, his eyes seeming to spark. "You should have stayed in the apartment." A searing pain blasted up Aliana's arms and threw her backwards. She rolled across the rough ground. Annabeth gripped her dagger and rushed Mason. He pushed himself to his feet and reached out with his free hand, the other squeezing the stone. A flash of lightning collided with her chest and blasted her back into a tree. She collapsed to the ground unconscious. Percy uncapped Riptide. "You just crossed the wrong half-blood." Mason smirked. "So did you." He released a bolt of lightning that threw Percy backwards into the wide stream nearby. Before Percy had a chance to get his bearings, Mason blasted a tree. The base of the trunk shattered and it snapped, falling towards the stream. Aliana pushed herself painfully off the ground and watched helplessly as the tree collapsed across the stream. "Percy!" She ran towards the water, but Mason stopped her, gun in hand. She drew her knife. Mason holstered his weapon. "You have a choice, Allie. Come with me, or save him." He jerked his head toward the stream. Aliana didn't hesitate. She dashed into the water. Mason disappeared into the trees. She waded deeper into the stream. It was surprisingly deep. "Percy!" she called. He would be fine as long as the tree hadn't impaled him, but he wasn't resurfacing. Desperate, she dove into the water. It was difficult, but she could see a figure convulsing among the debris. She swam over to find Percy unconscious, mouth open. His chest lurched violently as if he were drowning. The image of the stone's lightning striking his shoulder flashed through Aliana's mind. She scooped him into her arms and hauled him out of the water. Laying him on the muddy bank, she pumped his chest. "Come on, Percy." She breathed deeply into his mouth and continued chest compressions. Annabeth stumbled over from the trees. "Percy!" She knelt beside him. "Come on." Aliana pressed his chest harder. Finally he coughed, water spewing from his mouth. He rolled onto his side, hacking. Annabeth almost laughed in relief, tears springing to her eyes. Aliana sighed, a weight lifting off of her shoulders. He sat up. "What just happened?" Aliana met his confused gaze. "You drowned."